so much for coming out tonight. My name is Diana Reed. I'm the Director of Development and Alumni Relations here at CT State Manchester, formerly Manchester Community College. And this evening we have a special presentation on human trafficking in our community. And with us tonight are 4 individuals that will tell you more about human trafficking. So with us tonight is Anne-Marie Boulay from the Underground Northeast. And then we have Brittany Floor. We have Chris from Department of Children and Families. And we have Yvette from the Village. So we have some presentation, and they will go through a panel discussion, and then they will take some questions at the end. And finally, I want to thank Dr. Robert Fish, who's sitting up here in the front, maybe you can wave, for making this presentation possible. He is a very passionate supporter of providing services to human trafficking programs like the ones that are offered here tonight, and we do thank him for his support in making this particular program possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Sorry about that, folks. And I just want to thank you all for coming out tonight as a community, and a special thank you to Dr. Fish for your continued support in the anti-trafficking efforts here in Connecticut from as far away as Sarasota, Florida. So we're grateful to you, Dr. Fish, because this is our second session today. We had a wonderful experience at between 11 and 12 this morning with many of students in this room and faculty. We do this work to be able to help you understand what's happening in the state of Connecticut. I do represent the Underground New England, and as Diana said, my name's Anne-Marie. I'm the founder of UGNE. I am also going to click away, I think. Nope, wrong way. Just to give you a little idea about who the Underground is, we've been together since 2012. We got started on the Berlin Turnpike because my pastor years ago told me that trafficking was happening along that stretch of road. We are a faith-based initiative. Our whole work is to gather churches and communities together to stand in the gap for those who are being victimized. And again, we do that throughout Connecticut and New England. And so awareness events like this are very important. The reason why we get you in the room is to help you understand how you can help someone who's in trouble, or if you're personally experiencing something like this in your life, there's help out there if you need it. We represent one of several different providers that are in the state, and I'll tell you more about our work as we go on. But the whole point is to come together to do all we can as a community to eradicate trafficking. That's what we care about. Just a little bit more about the Underground so that you understand. We have a lot of partners in the state of Connecticut. In particular, there's a table called HART, H-A-R-T, which stands for the Human Anti-Trafficking Response Team. That represents stakeholders from the Department of Children and Family, and then many agencies throughout the state that are working directly with children and youth who have been victimized in this way. Folks like Love 146 and Siri. We have a couple of homes in the state, so sometimes they will represent. We certainly have VOCA at the table. And many times we have superintendents that will come in. The state wants to train, and actually it's mandated for our schools and the faculty within the schools to hear 101. So 101 would be Intro to Child Trafficking. And that's written, and it's also distributed, if you will. The trainers would come from DCF. I'm one of the trainers from DCF, Chris and Yvette are as well. And so we spend a lot of times in the schools teaching faculty and staff, and then there's other programs to train youth and the teens, right, that come from DCF. That HART table really has many people that sit at it. You should know this state, there are so many people who care to see trafficking eradicated in Connecticut. And so, again, these are some of our partners that we're very grateful for. The Underground New England does primarily 3 things. We bring awareness and prevention. When you leave tonight, you're going to be able to see these little round bracelets. They're black. They're called We Are Young. On the inside of that bracelet is a hotline number to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. That's Polaris out of Washington, D.C. There's also a text that if you're in trouble, you can just text that number, and they help triage and help folks that are being victimized get access to help, no matter where they are in the United States. That's the power of Polaris. So those little bracelets go in every single backpack or outreach bag that the Underground New England puts out, and it's through communities like you that we're able to do that kind of work. And so when frontline workers give those bags out, to, whether it's children, youth, or young adults, there are different pieces in there that victims can access if they need help, right? And so we try to use bracelets like that, especially in the school systems, that besides the fact that they hear this message, they now are wearing something that might help them if they need it. But that's one of the prevention pieces. And then, again, awareness. Obviously, that's what we're doing tonight. Direct care, direct supports to victims and survivors that are either minors or youth or young adults or even older adults. If somebody has been victimized in this way in the state of Connecticut, we try to offer help and help people to experience freedom. So direct supports is the second thing. And lastly, we care to build partnership. And so we love to have partnership. We've been partners with Manchester CC. We'd love to just keep expanding it. So to that end, this panel tonight is a great example of some of the folks that we stand with, who stand with us. So the point of tonight is for our friends next to talk to you a little bit about the story of Connecticut and what we know to be true in the state of Connecticut, especially, Underground works with young adults. We also bring direct supports to victims that are children, youth, so we can do certain things for them, right? But the real folks that we really try to stand with are young adults who are trying to exit a life of exploitation. So far, every adult that we've worked with has shared that they were exploited as a child, right? And so just because somebody turns 18, it doesn't make them any less of a victim. And so I always think it's very important for us to hear about the story of child trafficking in Connecticut. And most of what you're going to hear can transfer right into the college years for sure. Because the same things that children and youth are vulnerable, the same types of things carry into adulthood, right? Especially in our young adulthood. But we're going to turn it over now to Yvette Young. And Yvette Young and Chris Bitterini are going to go, they're going to present their pieces. But I would love for you both to just tell us a little bit about who you are so that the audience knows. So I don't have to. You go first, Yvette.
So I'm Yvette Young. I'm the Associate Vice President of Training and Advocacy at the Village for Families and Children. I previously worked as the HEART coordinator, so what Anne-Marie mentioned, the Human Anti-Trafficking Response Team in Connecticut. So I did that for 5 years, which is where I built my wealth of knowledge about child trafficking and human trafficking in general. And so some of the material that we're presenting to you tonight is from that introductory curriculum, just so you can kind of get a base understanding of what human trafficking is. I'm on the board of the Underground New England, and so have been doing these types of panel presentations with Anne-Marie for about 8 years now. Yes, so we have a long history together at this point. So that's a little bit about me. And I also co-chair the Victims of Crime Advisory Council through the Office of Victim Services, where we really look at all victims and advocate for and make sure that the resources and services are there for victims in our state, which is really important work for us to do, especially now when funding becomes compromised for this population. So the first slide that I show is, what is the story you tell yourself about human trafficking? And this came out of my watching Brene Brown's Dare to Be Courageous show special. I think it was on Netflix. And she talked about her vulnerability research and the fact that when we become overwhelmed with something, we're scared, we don't understand something, our brains will tell a story to make it okay. for us, right? So because we can't handle it, we can't deal with it, we don't know what to make sense of it, it fills in the gaps, right? Brain is a powerful tool. And so I thought about that when I was watching, and I was like, what is the story we tell ourselves about human trafficking? And often the story we tell ourselves is not my child, or loved one, or my community. So this is going to happen to me or anyone that I know. It's not going to happen in my backyard. That's not a reality I have to ever face, so I just block it. And when we do that, what we do is we create vulnerability and we create more exploitation because no one knows what to look for. No one is talking about the issue. Our children are not being educated and aware of what they need to be thinking about and looking for. So therefore, we don't find victims as easily when we stay in the dark, and we don't help our children protect themselves from this crime. So that's something to really think about as you go through the rest of this presentation. What is the story you've been telling yourself? Because the likelihood is, by the end of this panel presentation, that narrative is going to change for you. So one of the things we always do, and I'll just anchor us here, is to talk about the definition. It's so important for us to really truly understand when we say human trafficking, what does that mean? And so this is the Trafficking Victims Protection Act definition of human trafficking, and it's the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for two reasons: sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And it's through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. And so when we talk about sex trafficking, it's a commercial sex act for anything of value. And when we say anything of value, it's not just money. It could be food, clothing, shelter, etc. And then on the labor trafficking side, so for example, on sex trafficking side, I have to clarify this. You do not need to prove force, fraud, or coercion if it's a minor victim. So if the child is under the age of 18, you do not have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. If there's an exchange of sex for anything of value, it's automatically considered sex trafficking. On the labor side, though, children and adults have to prove force, fraud, or coercion when it comes to labor trafficking. In the state of Connecticut, we haven't seen as many cases on the child labor trafficking side, but they are there, and there's been a few over the years that the department has received. But we've seen a lot of sex trafficking cases for minor victims come through. And on the adult side, we see a lot of labor trafficking cases through massage parlor, nail salons, restaurants, etc. So we know labor trafficking is also happening in our state. So I think I was clear about this in my opening comments. Any child can be a victim of human trafficking. Oftentimes people will focus in on, where they're trauma victims, do they come from poverty, certain other criteria and categories we like to label people with to say those are the ones who get trafficked. So if my child or my loved one doesn't meet this criteria, they're fine, and that is a setup. Because we've seen cases where very affluent children with no social service engagement, no academic issues, doing extremely well, working hard, end up being trafficking victims, right? Because they get lured into life. And I think one of the things that is so important for you to sit with beyond this moment is vulnerability is the target. Yeah. It's not about what the child looks like. It's not about the community they come from. It's not about their racial makeup, religious belief system, their economic status. It's their vulnerability that the traffickers are seeking. So at the end of the day, every single child holds some form of vulnerability. So I think it's important that we understand that as long as you have some sort of vulnerability, you can be trafficked as an adult. And as children, they hold vulnerabilities that will also make them victims of this crime. So stripping is a gateway to human trafficking, and there is so many other pathways. Internet-based trafficking is pretty predominant. Our children are being sold and bought online. I think we need to anchor ourselves in that. We've had sites like Backpage, dating apps, chat rooms. There's so many ways, gaming systems, where people are getting access to our kids' Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever you want to name. They're finding them through those mediums, right? And they're luring them in. They're trying to be their friends. They're offering them things. They're befriending them to get them to be able to meet with them and then to eventually exploit them. There's a documentary called I Am Jane Doe, and in that documentary it said you can purchase a child as quickly as you order a pizza. 30 minutes or less, you can have a child be brought to your home or to a hotel room to be exploited. That easy. Right? And that anyone who's looking to have, and I want to be very clear with this, anyone who's looking to exploit a child knows exactly what they need to do that. And so ads might say the child is 18 or older, but we all know, you could tell by looking. And two, some of the language that traffickers will use when they're trying to sell children indicates that it's a younger person, so the adult who is purchasing know that they're purchasing a child. It's not accidental, it's choice. So we really need to hold that. On the demand side of this, we have a huge problem because there are people who want to have sex, want to exploit, want to victimize children. So we talk about, escort services, pornography, stripping, interfamilial. 30% of trafficking cases nationally are a loved one or a parent or caretaker selling a child, right? The youngest victim in Connecticut, 2-year-old little boy, he was sold by his uncle. So the reality is, and especially in interfamilial cases, you tend to see the age of the kids be a little bit younger than what often is talked about with adolescent age exploitation. Labor, we talked about. Marriage trapping is another way. And the reason why marriage trapping is important, you have to, if you're under the age of 16 and want to get married, I think the law just changed in Connecticut that now you have to be over the age of 18 to legally marry. But when it was younger than that, your parent had to sign off on that marriage. And what people weren't thinking about, when you think about interfamilial trafficking and the fact that parents are selling their children, why wouldn't a parent sell their child into marriage? So if it was advantageous, because these children were not marrying same age peers, they were marrying older adult individuals, that if the parent was truly trafficking their child, here was another medium that they could use to sell their child to someone else and call it marriage. So that was an issue that a lot of people are advocating and fighting for because we knew our kids were at risk. Some statistics before I end my part of the presentation. So this is some data from 2022. So we do have to update with the current data from 2023. And the highest number of referrals the Department of Children and Families have received was in 2022. They ended up closing the books at 310 referrals that year. Never saw numbers like that before. And I was working with HEART for 5 years. We saw a steady increase. We were averaging around 200 plus every year. And so to spike all the way to 310 was very telling. And this is obviously post-COVID, when we know most of our children were online and definitely being groomed and lured into a life of trafficking. So the prevalence, and this is in every single part of Connecticut, there is no particular region of Connecticut or that is spared from human trafficking. It's in everyone's community. And the last piece of data that I want to share with you, which I think is important, and especially when we do these panel events, we want to emphasize, is as we were doing the data for human trafficking, one of the things that started to become clear was that children who were living at home with a parent or caretaker were at higher risk of being trafficked. 68% of the referrals, 67% of the referrals in 2022 were children living at home. And that might mean they did not have DCF involvement, social service involvement, but they were lured into a life of trafficking while they were living at home with a parent. And a lot of times people think about human trafficking of someone being stolen, kidnapped, etc. They're missing, and that's not always the case scenario. You can have kids who are being trafficked after school hours. You can have kids who are saying they're going to a friend or family member's home on the weekend, and they're actually meeting the trafficker and they're exploiting them, and then they're coming right back home. And parents are not aware of what's going on because they're not aware that their child was lured because they could have been enticed through social media, online chat rooms, etc. And if parents are not monitoring communication and how their child is using their smartphones and their laptops, it's easy for traffickers to convince them to meet them out in public places. So we definitely have to pay attention to the need to educate our children in our community because they have no idea what they're up against, and they're prey. And the predators are well prepared and well trained to make sure that they get their needs met at the expense of a child. So keep that in mind because that's an important thing for you to go back out of this room and talk about this issue because there's too many of our kids that are being endangered. Thanks.
Thank you, Yvette. Yeah, sure. Brittany would like to say one thing. Got that
I want to point out what you're talking about with the children leaving their homes and going and doing things. And some of this new, I've been obviously doing a lot of research and talking to a lot of people and helping a lot of nonprofits just like yours with this type of situation. And a lot of these kids, when they're on these phones, right, these guys or people, they pretend to be the boyfriend, the long distance boyfriend. And they say, oh, just, send me a selfie without your tongue, right? And these kids, they send them one photo. All it takes is one. And then they use that as blackmail to get them to do these other things because they don't want that photo being released to their school, their parents. That's how they're using the social media. So it's not like these kids are like, oh, I'll get paid for it. No, it has nothing to do with that. They're blackmailed. So I just wanted to make sure that was said, because I don't, again, this is a very sensitive topic, and these kids, they can just be manipulated so easily, unfortunately.
Thank you, Brittany and Yvette. I neglected to say at the start of this that the things that you'll hear tonight might really cause a reaction in you. I remember the first time I heard about child trafficking back in 2014 in a way where I couldn't leave the room, and it was devastating, really. So I hope you're doing okay so far. But if you need to take a break, we want you to know that's okay. It's okay. The reason why the underground exists is because child trafficking and child use, young adult trafficking is happening in the state of Connecticut and throughout New England and really across the nation. And that's why we stand in this gap, right? Because we want to bring hope to those who have been victimized. We want to bring solutions. This slide before we speak to Chris, or you hear Chris, is called You Are Seen. And one of our survivor leaders did this campaign a few years back because she had been victimized as a 14-year-old girl in the school systems, missed it. So all kinds of faculty just didn't see it. And so her story talked about how important it is to look at youth or those that seem to have changed quite a bit. Don't look at them as if you already know their story. Try to see them, stop, and hear them, and try to understand what's happening to them so that we can provide some resources. That was her campaign. She's still trying to get her message out and be a voice, and these are the kind of folks that we want to hear from and that we want to support, right? So this next section is about red flags and signs and indicators. And so Chris Bigarini, before he shares, I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit more, but we're very blessed to have both Yvette and Chris is a victim advocate, and he does great things for the Department of Children and Families, especially in young ones' lives, right? He brings that hope. So it's a real privilege to hear from Chris. So Chris, tell us just a little bit before you start.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Oh, you don't?
I hate microphones. I have microphobia or something. So my name is Chris Bigarini. I've been working for the state of Connecticut for about 20 years. I've been with the Department of Children and Families for going on 14, and been doing anti-trafficking work for about 11 or 12 now. So I'm one of the trainers. I'm involved in HEART, the Human Anti-Trafficking Response Team at DCF, and I do the training. So a lot of these slides come from our training, which is free, so you can request it from the DCF website. Just type in HART. We come do the training. It's a 2-hour training. We have a number of different trainings. So we're going to skim through this information pretty quickly. But I am a trainer, and I work with HEART. I participated in developing our policy at DCF. I am on the board of directors for the Underground in England, and I'm a consultant for the state of Colorado as well. So that's a little bit about me. Before I get into the slides, I do want to speak to what Brittany was speaking about in terms of this, what's called sextortion, the blackmailing that's occurring online. And there's actually a great documentary that came out last year called Sextortion, the Hidden Pandemic. So I would encourage you all to check that out. And it really gives a good look at what this looks like. On average, from the time that these people are friend requesting or making contact with these young people, within 2 weeks, sextortion is occurring. And that's all it takes is 2 weeks. And it's usually somebody they don't know. Unlike sexual abuse, where we usually hear it's like, oh, it's a family member or somebody they were close to, with sextortion, it's usually a stranger. So, all right, so getting into red flags. I know you all can read this, so I'm going to not go off of this exactly. But really, what we people have this idea that we can identify these kids, and they never have human trafficking victim written across their forehead. Usually how they present is a child that a lot of people are really discouraged by and annoyed by. It's the youth that is missing a lot of school. So, they're skipping school as we see it, right, on the outside. They're not coming home from school afterwards. They're staying out late at night, maybe for days at a time, going missing. When they come back, they're under the influence, so they've probably been partying. They have an attitude, right? And a lot of times people think when you rescue or we do stings that we're finding these youth and they're saying, oh, thank you. And it's really the opposite. It's usually like an F you before anything else. Because they've gone through so much manipulation and this coercion, trauma bonding, all of these things that have played a role where they don't recognize that they're victims. And so a lot of these red flags are things that we see and we don't realize that it's trafficking. We talked about grooming, so new clothing, electronics, or items of value. I know what my kids can afford. If they come home with a new iPhone or a pair of shoes, I'm going to wonder, A, where did you get that? And B, why did they give it to you? Because nobody's spending money on someone without expecting something in return.
That's right.
Right? Inconsistent scripted communication, tense, fearful, oppositional. So I just have to give that image of like those youth that a lot of times we probably want to, people have used the term throw away, that they're just annoying, like they're bad kids to a lot of people. That's how our society and our communities look at these kids. When you peel back the layers, you see what's really happening. And it could be trafficking. So jumping into damage to the victim, again, these slides are all part of our training, so if you want to learn more, I encourage everyone to request those trainings. We do them at schools, I've done them at camps, town halls, wherever you want, really. So damage to the victim, substance abuse problems or addictions. So it's possible that that youth was brought into what we call the life because they had a substance use issue, or maybe their trafficker introduced them to drugs to cope with it. They're being exploited by potentially 5 to 25 people a night. So imagine this idea of, okay, well, if you take this drug, it might make it a little easier for you. And now that child has a physical addiction to that drug, and where are they going to get the drug? Back to the trafficker. So they develop substance use problems or addictions, psychological trauma. From what I just said, you can imagine the psychological trauma from that alone, let alone the abuse they're experiencing from their trafficker. I mentioned that force, fraud, and coercion. So psychological trauma and mental abuse. Medical problems from the physical abuse, but also from all of these encounters. Bruises, scars, and branding. We've heard of traffickers tattoo their victims or brand them. There was one in Bridgeport that actually put a barcode on the victims. Think of objectification that's occurring. And also showing that you are my property in a sense. Because that's this dynamic that they want to create. Infertility from repeated STIs or abortions. And you can imagine the traffickers not taking them to Planned Parenthood. So they're getting an abortion in the basement possibly. STIs, as I mentioned, unwanted pregnancy, dental problems, and way more. That's just the start. High rates of suicidal ideation, suicide attempt, all types of issues. As we move into steps to prevention, pro-social activities and supports and positive connections. Having our youth connected to people in the community, making sure they have those supports. So if they do have a void, or if they do have a, what is the word used? Vulnerability, thank you. They have those supports in their life. I always tell parents as well that you can't expect to be the only person for your child. And say, oh, if you need something, come to me. Because no matter how close you are with your child, there's going to be something where they may not feel like they can come to you. So it's important to identify, if you can't come to me, who can you go to, right? Risk reduction. So next, educating our youth on sex trafficking. We have a youth curriculum for ages 12 to 18 where we talk about all of this stuff. And people think, oh, you can't talk to my kids about that. They already know. Trust me, they already know.
Yeah.
It's in their culture, it's in movies, it's in music. They know about it. So it's better we educate them and prevent it from happening than not. Internet and social media safety, can't stress this enough. I know Yvette mentioned it. Internet is the biggest means by which our children are being pulled into the life. They all have access to children. The traffickers go wherever children are going. Whether it's video games, Facebook, Snapchat, all of the above. That's where they are going. So teaching our youth about internet safety, as Brittany had mentioned, not sending images, right? Not sharing images of themselves. I can't tell you how many parents on the first day of school post an image of their kid with, here's my kid goes to school, they're starting this grade, their teacher's this person. You just gave the internet everything they need to know about your kid, right? I've mentioned to people, I can go on your child's social media and tell you exactly how they would be trafficked, very easily, from one glance at their social media. Traffickers know what they're doing. School success and youth employment opportunities, showing our youth that they have other means, other options. A lot of youth that I've worked with say, well, I wasn't going to graduate. I wasn't going to get a job. I don't know what else. So making sure that they have that success and vocational opportunities is really important. And educating the community, which is what you're doing right now. So thank you. Yvette had mentioned how our numbers and reports have gone up. And people are like, oh no, that's horrible. It's actually a great thing. Because the reality is we're just hitting the surface. There are thousands of kids in Connecticut that are being exploited. And so by getting this word out there, by educating the community, we're getting more referrals, which means we're identifying the youth that are being trafficked, which is a good thing. That's it.
Yeah.
For me.
For now. Chris, before we end here, can you just share just briefly about traffickers and buyers? I noticed we don't have those slides, but just what's the profile?
So traffickers and buyers can be anyone. They can be male, they can be female, any age. In a lot of situations, they can start through this grooming process and be what's called the term Romeo pimp, where they start out as like a boyfriend or girlfriend, and create this sense of love, right? And this is what we see really commonly, is the sense of love that maybe the youth didn't have before. And then they say, okay, well, if you love me, you'll do this. Or, you know, if we need to go on this vacation, maybe you can do this to make some money, right? And now this exploitation occurs, and they're told, well, if you want to go back to this love, and you want to have that again, you just have to do this for me. And so that youth is continually entering this cycle, trying to get that relationship back. There's a quote from one of our trainings that says,
Promise them heaven. And
thank you. Promise them heaven and they'll follow you to hell. And that's exactly what happens. And buyers, so 75% make up high-frequency buyers who are just doing this repeatedly. As I said, it can be 5 to 25 people on any given night, which tell you there are people out there that are buying children. They exist in America, right? The biggest demographic of buyers is white married men that make 6 figures or more. And when you hear about stings in the news, you hear there's congressmen, there's doctors, there's lawyers, there were some Disney World employees, all of the above. There's really, it could be anyone.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Just to give you a sense of the demand, years ago, I think it was 2018, there was a state attorney in place that was part of a sting. He reported at one of the tables that they were conducting an online sting operation. So it was just 2 sex ads for a 14-year-old girl, just 2. That ad ran, and I believe it was in the town of Guilford, Connecticut, and there were 5,000 hits in 30 days. That is a problem. When Chris says that how do we know the numbers of youth that are being exploited? It's real. Like 5,000 hits in 30 days in a place like Guilford, Connecticut is a problem. And it's why we exist. And so it is really, honestly, we cannot tell you how blessed we are once again to hear from these 3 folks. And we do appreciate your advocacy and all that you continue to do, to bring this message so that we can help youth stay safe and as people age, right, and move out of their teen years and into their adulthood, we want kids that are at communities to stay safe, like young adults. I call them kids because I just turned 60, but our young adults, we want them safe. So I hope what you heard, you can take away from here and make sure you share what you've heard and spread awareness with us. It's just that simple. It's just as simple as whatever you heard tonight, just sharing it, right, with your people. The Underground New England, I just want to let you know that we do support, like I said over and again, victims and survivors. One of the major programs that we are doing right now is something called UGNE, Survivor Ally Mentor Program, and we provide provide adult survivor supports and services to those who are actively seeking to leave a life of exploitation. And we do that by meeting people at the point of exit, and we provide a hand if they're looking to take it, to come out of the life, and what we attempt to do with them, with their agency and their participation, we attempt to help them get onto a pathway of freedom. It's a long haul, right, to help somebody experience freedom, but that is the work that we want to be about. And so we have this program. Actually, Dr. Fish blessed us with a pretty significant grant when we were in the dream stages of this program back in, I believe it was 2021. And we got official last year in 2022 when we launched, which is huge. And so we stand with folks that are looking to live in independence, live in agency, who were previously trafficked. And there's all kinds of ways that we're helping them, whether it's bridging them to resources that they can access or medical care. We have a partner called Gina out in Rocky Hill that has trauma-informed care, and they provide this awesome experience actually for folks who have been exploited, where the medical care doesn't seem like it's medical care, so it's not as scary to the folks that are sitting there. We have some beautiful partners. This morning, Hummingbird Project was here with us, and Jamaica shared a little bit about their work, and I could just go on, but it takes a village to help folks live in independence. And if you want to learn more, I would really encourage you to please, as you exit today, would you just take the underground card and get connected to us and visit our website and see a little bit more about that program. It's really doing great things. I'll just say this, in just a 2-month time frame earlier this year, we helped rescue 14 men and women from a life of exploitation. I can't say we rescued them, actually. We just stood there, like I said, with our hand, and they wanted to come out of the life, and we helped them, because we don't rescue. That is not accurate. But there are other ways you can help, just like you saw this awareness event tonight, we can take this anywhere. And usually when we bring awareness, at least to curriculum, like Chris was talking about, there's a 2-hour thing that the trainers can train on. We can stand in schools, we can stand at youth groups, we can be in a forum like this, so please let us know if we can help in that way. Talk to your youth, and there's always all kinds of ways that you can support the anti-trafficking movement. You can stay connected with the underground by signing up for our newsletter, and that will give you all kinds of information about what's happening in the state of Connecticut. Last thing, and I'm going to keep this slide up for the rest of the night, this is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. We would love for you to pop this in your phone in case you see somebody who's in trouble or know of somebody who's in trouble. This hotline will take care of children, youth, and adults. We have a dedicated care line in the state of Connecticut that is there for children and youth. So if somebody's experiencing this who's under the age of 18, I would encourage you to start with the care line. But really, we could go ahead and use this hotline for anybody who's experienced exploitation. Say again? Yeah. If you're calling the care line, Chris is saying, you must talk about the fact that you suspect that a child's being human trafficked or sexually trafficked, please. And that'll start a whole investigation. In the past 2 years, and Yvette alluded to it, there's been over 550 reports and referrals to the care line for children and youth who are suspected to be trafficked victims. With that, again, listen, we very much appreciate you being with us. We do want to open it to questions, and thank you so much for your attention tonight.
I want to really reach out, well, to everybody, but for Chris talking about the work DCF is doing. DCF, to the average Connecticut citizen, just gets talked about in such a negative way. And DCF didn't do this, and DCF didn't do this, and this child fell through the crack, and how come DCF missed that? And that's bad news, always trumps goodness. You can have some fabulous program at a high school or in a junior high school. One kid brings a knife or traffics or does one bad thing, and that's where they get all the press and all of the recognition that they seek. And I just hope that you can really promote and maybe take this plea from little old me to really market the positives of DCF, because that is the reality, that DCF is a bad thing and is habited by bad people. I mean, I'm fabulously impressed with your program. Thank you very much.
As you should be. Joette Katz used to be the commissioner of the Department of Children and Families, and she once said to the audience in 2014, she said, you know, DCF has 4,000 children and youth that they take care of annually. And we're only as happy as our well, how did she put it? We're only as happy as our, I can't remember how she put it. Goodness, I wish I should not have started that quote, but here's the thing that she was trying to say. There's a lot of problems with the kids that they take care of. And it's 4,000. And there's not a lot of resources. And her heart would be to see them all good and okay, right? So it is hard to hear the positives of DCF, but the fact is, these people at DCF are some of the greatest people I've ever met in my life, and I'm one of their champions and advocates. Every time I stand in an audience, anytime I stand on a platform, I want to remind the communities that DCF has a massive job, and they're not dealing with easy kids, right? And so we have to do everything we can as communities to stand with them and help them accomplish their work. So thank you, Dr. Fish, for pointing that out.
In my life, I guess I had the basic understanding that when you're raising your child, if you were to get them involved in activities, any kind, whatever they're interested in, you know, sport, dance, music, whatever the programs were, that would help to keep them out of the situation. I see, Brittany. That would help them keep them out of the situation where they can get in trouble, like this human trafficking. But actually what I heard from you tonight was that you said anybody can do that. It can happen to anybody. So it kind of leaves me with the thought like, okay, well how could this be, and I know you have programs and things that you're doing and stuff, but how can this work where it can be really more preventable, I guess, than reactionary, I guess, in terms of dealing with the situation? And I know it's not a small issue, so I'm not trying to state that at all.
Yeah, so keeping them off the phones. If you can monitor the phones more regularly, that's a huge piece. But also having good communication and that open communication where if they are vulnerable, they can come talk to you. That is, I would say, one of the most important things, because if kids are going to make mistakes, and if they feel uncomfortable, they can come talk to you about it instead of being scolded and shunned and shamed. I think that's going to create that bridge, as you talked earlier. It's going to create that ability for you to have that intervention and help them. Let's pass it on to her.
So I would just echo that. I think prevention, like you said, is key. Once our children are brought into the life, getting them out, identifying them, and getting them out is extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. So prevention is key. And aside from educating youth about trafficking, educating them about consent, about healthy relationships, all of those things is really important. Understanding what control looks like, understanding what abuse looks like.
Now, I was going to say that empowering your child to understand this crime and how to identify the tactics that the traffickers are using is important. I think you can expose your kid, they can be actively engaged, they can be, great students, great civically engaged individuals, But yet again, what is their vulnerability? And as a parent, do you understand what that vulnerability is for your child? And that, as I said, it doesn't matter what environment the child comes from, the vulnerability is what the trafficker targets. So are you having conversations? Are you, discussing risk factors? Are you talking about tactics? Are you giving them knowledge and information to protect themselves? I think as adults, we assume we're going to be there and we can save kids all the time. We can help them when they fall down, but there are times we are not there. And so if we know we're not going to be there, how do we equip them? Because that's a part of parenting, is to train up the child, right? How do we equip them so that when they are not with us, we know they have enough information to spot that trafficker, to say, no, this doesn't sound right. My parent told me to watch out for this, and so I need to make a better choice, or no, I'm not going to go with them. I'm going to go home, or I'm going to tell someone that someone did this or said this to me. So we really got to empower our kids. We got to stop treating them like they don't have the ability to make informed decisions, and that they can't make good decisions if we equip them with the knowledge to do so. And that's the place to start. Because it doesn't matter what else you do, if they don't have that basic knowledge and understanding that you now have, how are they going to protect themselves? Because you will not be with them 24/7. You will not see when they go over their friend's house and start using the phone because you decided not to give them a cell phone in your home, or they don't have a laptop in your home, but as soon as they go visit their friend, they're on it. Or when they're in school, they're borrowing phones and going on, social media sites. So you have to be smarter than to think that complete isolation and removal is not the only way to protect your child.
I'd like to know more about what are your ideas on programs that can be built, on help from the community that can be brought up, that will bring us all together, unify us for one sole purpose, and that is to end human trafficking, as well as bring a huge, like a huge target on the back of abuse. Because people don't understand that through abuse is how people are exploited. I don't know if that makes sense, sorry.
Yeah.
So I can.
Go ahead.
So I think one big piece of that is people think that you attack trafficking by addressing trafficking. And really, and when we talk about prevention, it's dealing with the issues that get children into that position, which is the vulnerabilities. And two major vulnerabilities are being part of the LGBTQI plus community. That puts youth at risk. Not because, oh, I'm a lesbian, but because I was rejected by my family, I was bullied by my friends, I don't feel seen in the media, all of those factors. So embracing that community can prevent a lot of those youth from ending up being trafficked, right? Same thing when we talk about immigration. We talk about undocumented individuals and how they end up being trafficked. And some people that are saying, oh, I want to support and go against human trafficking are then creating immigration laws that only encourage it and support the trafficker. So it's addressing those issues as well to help prevent by addressing those vulnerabilities, taking people that would be vulnerable and supporting them so they don't get to that point where a trafficker can use those vulnerabilities against them.
I would say what I would add to that is that, when we talk about human trafficking, we talk about the victim, we talk about the trafficker, we don't talk enough about the buyers. And there's a slide that we have in the intro curriculum called The Economics of Human Trafficking. And the reality is that you have a need for supply, or the demand is high for exploitation of children, and so the supply has to be given to that demand, right? If the demand wasn't there, we wouldn't have as many children who are being victimized, right? We wouldn't have to be worried about vulnerabilities being exploited, etc. But we don't talk enough about the buyers. We don't talk enough about the demand and why that's there, and why it's not being eradicated, and why it's not stopped, and why victims are victimized further in situations when there's sting operation and the buyers are able to pay their lawyers or attorneys and get off and don't have anything happen to them, maybe some public shaming, but that might be it for when they have these larger sting operations they put pictures of. But if we're not talking about all three parts of this equation, it's going to continue to perpetuate itself. If that demand is there, and we all know economics, if the demand remains, supply will be identified. And I always say, when I did that slide, by any means necessary. So if I have to kidnap you, if I have to use force and violence, or if I have to groom you, I'm getting you to be a supply so I can meet the demand, so I can get the funds, right? So we have to start thinking about all three of those angles as a community in order for us to move away from this victimization.
So my question to the panel is, what are you guys doing to educate the adult, to educate the parents, to let them know that this is something that needs to be spoken about in your home and to your children. Are there programs available that are doing that now?
I think the reason why we emphasize so much the education of our kids and youth is because we do so much training of our adults. So when we get to go into school systems, it's not because they're letting us in to talk to the kids. We have to go in and talk to the staff because people are so uncomfortable at exposing kids to this content. When we do these types of panel presentations, it's adults that usually show up. It's usually parents that are in the audience. When we train different personnel like law enforcement, EMT officers, medical professional, teachers, as I said, social service workers, wherever they come from, there's a law right now that says that there's certain professions that have to at least at minimum go through an intro curriculum. So we have a lot of, DCF has almost 10 curriculums that they've developed and they're free, for the community. We get in front of a lot of adults. When you look at the statistics for HEART, there's like thousands upon thousands of adults that have been trained in this content. And we have to, that's why we do these panel events, because we want to continue to train because we can't get to enough people to get this message out there. So when our emphasis is on the kids, it's because we know that they're not getting enough of this information, and that we're hoping that the adults that are trained is trickling it down, but we know that that might not get delivered the way that it needs to, or they may not hear it from that adult because it's a parent and they're rolling their eyes like, you don't know what you're talking about, because parents aren't cool, so they wouldn't get this and they don't know what they're talking about. So that's the only reason why we emphasize. But as far as adult trainers and doing that, we do that well in Connecticut, and we've reached a lot of communities through the free curriculums that we have in this state.
So again, yeah, you can just go on the DCF website, type in HART, H-A-R-T, and request a training. We have one for EMS staff, one for hotel staff, one for police officers. We have a ton of trainings. I've trained like 50 people this week already. So we definitely get out there.
Thank you for all that you all are doing. And thinking about the partnerships that you have with the communities, do you partner with churches, like local churches? And I don't know if you said that already, I did come in a little bit late, but just wondering what relationship you have with the various faith-based communities and getting the word out there.
The Underground New England is a faith-based initiative. Yeah, and I didn't say that up front, but I was just trying to save time. But actually, our work is to bridge the church and communities like these to the anti-trafficking movement in Connecticut, and have churches and communities like this engage in volunteer efforts, boots on the ground, type of awareness pieces that we can send into businesses, and just lots of other ways that church can help. So, and communities like this. So, if you ever want to bridge us to a church, we are constantly speaking to churches. We have probably had at least close to 450 churches at our events since we started. So we're known, and we'd love to get to know your church.
Thank you guys, everybody, for being here. I just want to say that coming here, I knew that it would be hard to hear. And I think, I can speak for everyone that it is hard to hear. And so I kind of have two questions. First would be, in Connecticut or just in general with your experience, do you see them groom the kids when it is grooming, kind of like what you were talking about? I have a 17-year-old daughter. She's amazing. I would worry. And it doesn't matter, I think, how much I pay attention to her, because every day I learn something new. But I think that first question would be, do you find that they would groom to see them turn 18? Because that seems to be something that I would think, then they wouldn't have to worry about that hump anymore of it being a minor. And the parents lose more control. And what could a parent do, or what could I even give advice to another parent maybe who might see their 17 or 16-year-old slipping?
Yeah.
So I'll just start, and you guys have so much good information. So I would look out for the separation if they start pulling away from you. So you probably done a very good job in keeping that part right. So I would say that just keep that relationship very, that's why I was saying earlier about the communication. I mean, they made much better points about prevention and communication about other things. So I think that's definitely more important, but keeping that communication bridge open, I think that you'll find, if you keep on it, you'll know if something changes, even a slight change.
I think what I would say about the 17 into 18 and whether or not it's easier because they're now an adult, doesn't matter. The reality is that we're not seeing a level of prosecution for traffickers or buyers that we should, that would make them feel afraid of exploiting children. We're just not seeing it, right? The numbers are extremely low when that's concerned. So it doesn't matter if there's 15, 14, 13, 12. They're still taking the risk because it feels like low risk to them to exploit. And I remember, and it stuck out to me, this documentary where you had a guy that was a drug trafficker, and he said every 5 minutes he was like pinned to the ground and being arrested, and he said he just decided, like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna sell these women and girls. And he said, I've been quite at his leisure, let's say, since then, because no one's really looking or checking for him. Because the level of, enforcement on the drug side is higher than that.
You said twice, 5 to 25 per night.
Yeah.
You're talking about the victim or how many buyers?
The number of buyers on any given night.
For one victim.
For one victim.
For one victim.
So one victim being
Could
used 5 to 25 times a night
Yep.
in Connecticut.
Yep.
That's just hard facts to hear.
And we had an actual case when we do the intro.
Thank you.
There was a 15-year-old child that was rescued, and when they spoke with that child, she was in the life for less than a year, and she ended up having 6,300 buyers in that short period of time and this is her telling them what she had to endure while she was being victimized. So it's painful, and that's why I think sometimes people glamorize this or talk about issues of choice. They're teenagers, they're choosing to do this. They're not choosing to do this. When you understand the level of torture that these young children are experiencing, you can never ever have the audacity to say this is a choice that they're making.
And I just want to jump on that because I know you asked about like looking at cases in Connecticut and grooming. Grooming is definitely a big one, but survival sex, which I know was on that list, was another one, which is youth that are without food, without clothing, without a place to stay, without a ride, and maybe are offered an opportunity to get any of those needs met by performing a sexual act. And so there may not be a trafficker involved, but you have that thing of value being exchanged for a sexual act. And I think a lot of people don't see that as trafficking. They see that as a choice. They see it as, oh, well, that kid was homeless and they decided to have sex with that person so they had a place to stay. That was their choice. And I encourage everyone to kind of reframe that as, regardless of what choice you think that child had, you have an adult that sees a child that's missing one of their basic needs and says, oh, you're homeless? I can have my sexual needs met by taking advantage of that vulnerability. But survival sex is definitely a big one too, which again is our LGBTQI community is more at risk of that due to being kicked out of their home, etc. So really supporting our youth and their vulnerabilities is important.
So I'd like to actually thank them very much for their time. Please go share this in your communities and take advantage of some of the free programs that were mentioned to you tonight and bring them to your communities, to your schools, to your organizations. So thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. Have a safe ride home.